I've gone for two controversial issues today. One would be the bare feet, the other would be David's choice of attire.
Yeah, he was mimicking someone else.
Did you keep that? That's all right. Fingers crossed this works, guys. It does. Fantastic. Guys, I actually... Oh, can't go back. I actually studied the science of willpower. And one of the reasons why I actually chose this is because I feel like the industry might be moving into a different, slightly different approach from a physical type of session. I think we're moving more towards psychological-based training, from training your clients to behave better. Okay? So just have that little seed in your brain as we continue the session. Now, fortunately today, we've actually managed to build upon Dr. Susie Cox's session. We're also going to build upon, who else was talking about psychology today?
Brian.
Ben Cook as well, less so from a pain perspective, less so from a leadership perspective, but Ben actually touched upon some information in his session that he questioned why, he wasn't sure why things occur in the brain. I'm going to explore that avenue a little bit more about the science behind behaviour, why we respond to stimuli and not respond to stimuli. I'll also allude to taking us through a journey. We'll go through a journey of the brain. Okay? I'm going to show you a couple of short videos today, as well as provide some evidence, provide some evidence as to what willpower is, where it comes from, what happens to willpower when we use it, and what some strategies or techniques or training can we do to improve our resolve. Okay? So without further ado, let's spin this board around very, very quickly. Zoom! We have numbers. Scary thought. Can I get you to flip the lights, please, Pamela? Yes. The whole screen. Sorry?
That little,
Ian,
yeah,
put the
that
whole
one.
screen on.
That's it.
Screen.
Yeah, allow it.
The technical difficulties. Thank you to Dinesh as well for supporting me and getting a little video uploaded here. So, I would like to go towards where I'm going to. And we're going to talk a little bit about a mind journey. So, here is the brain. This is the equivalent of Google Maps centuries and centuries of years ago. So here is an actual video of the brain. Now, when you view the brain in normal time, you probably see it's a bit of grey matter. Okay, so you think it's grey. Look at the beautiful blood vessels surrounding this fresh brain on some ice. Think about this. The body uses 20% of the oxygen that you consume to power the brain. Not only that, it actually uses 30% of the glucose in the body as well. Here we have the reverse of the brain, the cerebellum down here. We have what's called the occipital lobe, and at the front, the opposite side there, we have the frontal lobe. Okay, so when we think about the brain, we can actually cut it in half, from top to bottom, in a cross-sectional area. Now, that dark figure initially didn't really tell us much, but what it does tell us from this perspective is that we can actually stain the brains these days. Stain and find little populations or densities of neurons that we can't quite see from this angle, but if you think of it like Australia, map of Australia, Perth over here, Sydney over here, it looks similar from left to right, but there are subtle differences. Can you see? Yeah?
No, Tasmania.
Not much in Tasmania, no Tasmania at all. But we can see subtle differences in the staining techniques. About 100 years ago, scientists revealed this. So let's investigate a little bit further now into the actual neurons. And if we look into the neurons here, we can see populations of neurons all together in here. So we can find that the neurons, there are 86 billion of these neurons assisted by astrocyte glia. Okay, astrocyte glia are the chefs. They provide nutrients to the actual neurons, and neurons are powered by synapses, and the neurons are actually connected to 10,000 more neurons in the brain. Okay, we've had a pause for a second here, I don't know why. Dinesh, you ruined me. So this is a neuron, just to kind of summarize very quickly, and these are some of the nerves that are sent through synapses to the rest of the body. Here is a synapse on its way. Now, when we think about this, as we progress more into nerves, we know that we receive afferent signals. We receive the nervous system processes these sensory information, and then sends out efferent signals. So let's look inside the actual neuron itself now. So as we go inside, we are made up of proteins. Now the proteins in the actual neurons themselves have little functions like ion channel movement and also regulate a lot of the nervous system. Here is a genome with 13 pairs of chromosomes. Mom and dad give you these, and we have these linked as DNA within the system. Okay? So there's approximately 25,000 pairs of genes as part of your DNA. And when we look at the cell structure or formation, we actually analyse which of these genes are turned on, in what sequence are they turned on, and to what extent. Okay? So this is you. So you might be thinking, why the hell, Pam, if you don't mind please, lights on. Why the hell do you need to know this information? Now this wasn't covered in the session with Dr. Morwena Kirkman. Okay, she actually just went into a very brief amount, but it spurred my interest on in terms of information in this regard. So, when we're analysing behaviour, the reason why we need to know where things are in the brain, what parts of the brain are activated, is because we want to analyse behaviour, we need to change behaviour. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah? And the three main things that we can do to change behaviour. We must understand that we have a clear goal and why. It's evident from the actual education we give to our clients, to give to our students, our friends, that having a clear and concise goal over a long period of time, but with the emotion and motivation to drive that on, is absolutely essential to changing your behaviour. Okay? Long term as well. The second thing we have here is the need to self-monitor. So to understand checking in with yourself. So you simply check yourself before you wreck yourself. Yeah, absolutely. Check yourself. Thank you very much, Milo. So check yourself before you wreck yourself, and self-monitoring your behaviour and the things that you're doing to lead on to success in your goals. The last thing we're going to pay most attention to today is willpower. Excuse me. Willpower. Now, I'm going to tell you towards the end of the session, and through the evidence that we're going to see in the actual analysis through the brain, we have a reserve. Yeah? People link willpower to a muscle. All right? Like a muscle, this reserve can fatigue, and it requires rest and recuperation in order to sustain high-level performance. Okay? I'm going to evidence that with a little bit of research as well. Now, Dr. Morwena, she's from UWS. She's a professor at UWS in psychology. And I feel quite privileged because I left a little note on her website saying, hey, Dr. Morwena, just want to say thank you for the session. Really found it interesting and intriguing. Look me up anytime if you want to kind of get together, have a coffee, have a chat, not in that kind of way. But yeah, just to get together. She LinkedIn me. I was quite, chuffed. So she came up my LinkedIn profile. So I'm there, it's great. So we're talking about how we can actually mind map. So mind mapping is essential for understanding activation of the brain in certain locations that gives us an understanding of how we can adapt behaviour. And I'll prove that in a second. So here's the science, folks. And if we look at the actual brain here, we can find that, as I said before, the brain is separated into actual 4 lobes. The frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe, which is on here, as well as the cerebellum. Okay, the cerebellum. Now, the prefrontal cortex is basically the CEO, okay, the CEO of the brain. I'll allude to that in a second, but it has lots and lots of interesting functions to it, what we call executive functions. The second thing about the prefrontal cortex is it seems to be the overriding mechanism of actually guiding behaviour, okay? It's your good self, if it were, okay? And at the good self, this is where we find that glucose levels change with decision making and making a lot of choice in everyday life, okay? Not only that, if you're an adolescent, you'll find that you have a lower developmental part of the actual forebrain of the frontal lobe. Secondly, the brain actually moves from a posterior to an anterior in terms of its development. So as we age, our bodies might be completely developed, 20s, mid-20s, wherever it may be. But actually, this is still growing. This is still developing. And white matter, known as myelin in the actual brain, is lower in adolescence and youth. Okay? So it's got a lot of catching up and kind of explains why adolescents exhibit irrational thought and inappropriate behaviours out in society. Okay? So let's have a look a bit more about the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex then is, consider it as an explanation, the prefrontal, before the front or in the very frontal lobe of the brain. The cortex then is what we can consider the neocortex, or the outer shell of the brain, which is concerned with the separation between us and animals. All right? It's that higher state of consciousness, that ability to regulate our emotions and give us some decisive decision making. Okay? So that's the prefrontal cortex. And if I look at, did I get handouts? I didn't. My apologies. I was too busy trying to sort the thing out. So we'll very quickly take a few, pass them on. At the very front page of this, I pass them on around the room. There's probably not enough to go around. We've got some additional people in the room. At the very first page, we have a list of different functions or activities of the prefrontal cortex. Okay? Here are some that I just listed here. So we can actually get a scope on what our future consequences of what we're currently doing are. All right? So it makes the decision of, hey, if I'm doing stuff now, is this going to lend towards me achieving my goals in the future? Okay, it's analysis. We can work towards this goal as well. All right, so it gives us a recognizable pathway in which we can take baby steps, as someone earlier said, small steps to achieving a set objective. All right. We can evaluate and again predict future performance based on what we're currently doing now, and obviously societal cues as well, along with constant evaluation, and the most important part of this, I believe, is more self-regulation. Okay, checking yourself before you reckon yourself. Okay, so let's have a little look at one experiment. Now you might, if those of you actually looked at this or looked at the table here, you have two different sets of containers. One with the cookie jar, Cookie Monster, and one with some radishes. Okay, now I'll come to the radishes and the cookie jar in just a second, but you also have on your desk marshmallows. Raise your hands if you ate the marshmallow.
I never got one.
You never got one? Oh, Brett! Has anyone else got a marshmallow?
Yeah, I got one.
Pass them round, pass them round. Those that actually received them, can I get a raise of hands? Did you eat your marshmallow?
No.
Milo did. Okay, so, and I'll allude to this in a second, but Milo might exhibit lack of self-control. He was the one person I was relying on to eat the marshmallow. Alright? So,
I'm working for you, Ace.
Let's go into the marshmallow experiment. Now, the marshmallow experiment actually looked at children aged 4 to 6 years old and analysed, could they delay gratification? So when placed with a marshmallow in front of them, could they delay gratification for at least 15 minutes before they received a second marshmallow? Okay, let's have a quick look what goes on.
Alright, here's the deal. Marshmallow, for you. You can either wait, and I'll give you another one if you wait, or you can eat it now. When I come back, I'll give you another, so they know how to. But stay in here and stay in the chair till I come back, okay? Alright.
So they left the child alone 15 minutes.
So I'm not going to turn
The children were analysed. Now they believe they weren't being filmed. No supervision. They were challenged. They were challenged in terms of what their behaviours might be as a consequence of this.
Twins.
It's really good.
That's it.
Don't look at it. It's not there.
So the cardinal rules: taste but don't chew, look but don't touch.
This kid's doing
This kid is the cutest. Oh no, I can't. All right, we'll slide up. You get the general picture, right? Okay, I could watch it all day as well. So the general picture was that the kids were analysed in terms of their behaviours whilst delaying their gratification. And in some children, they just simply couldn't delay the gratification. They just simply ate the marshmallow. As soon as that door was closed, woof, down it went. Okay? Some of them managed to achieve that 15-minute delayed gratification as well. What the research were analysing was, is there a sense of willpower that is depleted when trying to stop yourself from completing some kind of motor task, i.e. picking up that marshmallow and chewing it, not delaying gratification. And what the study found was, yes, willpower was depleted. Energy or strength or cognition, thinking, was depleted. Okay? The next, or a couple of actual studies as well, analysed children in school era, so school youth age, and they analysed could they delay gratification in school, that kind of age, and what were the consequences 40 years down the line. And they found that those with improved delayed gratification at a young age had better relationships with their family, had less financial worries throughout their lives, managed to stay away from the long arm of the law, etc. And these were some positive outcomes as a consequence of delayed gratification. The next study was analysing the same aspects, so willpower again, not necessarily delayed gratification here, but more a choice. The cookies versus the radishes. All right? So they got somebody to actually sit down in front of cookies and radishes in a room, of which the cookies were baked in and all these fantastic smells accumulated. And they were asked to, or duped into thinking it was a taste test. One intervention group ate the cookies, the other intervention group tasted the actual radishes, okay, and there was a control group as well. Immediately after sitting in the room for about 15 minutes or so, maybe a little bit longer, with the actual cookies and radishes in front of them, they were then to complete an immediate impossible task. And the impossible task was to trace out a diagram without overlapping on the current drawing that they'd made, so they weren't allowed to overlap their lines. It was an impossible task. What the researchers were analysing was how long would they persevere with this task. Okay? They found that the cookie jars, the cookie monsters, tasted away, they had an improved persistence on the task. Okay? Whereas the radishes halved their persistence on the task. So this lasted about 40 minutes persistence in the impossible task here, about 19 minutes in the impossible task here. Okay? So immediately after administering some kind of resource not to eat the cookies, remember again in the room they weren't supervised, they were being filmed, but they weren't supervised. Okay? So to resist temptation, they used some kind of power from the self, some kind of strength. Alright? So there's the cookies and the radishes. Would you agree with me if I told you that your clients have a very troubling time trying to balance their lifestyle? Yeah? Not eating the cookies, not eating that pizza, not going out and getting drunk, not doing any exercise. Yeah? It's a very difficult balancing act for them, and it's simply because they can't understand other languages. It's like another language to them, okay? And we have to try and educate as best we can. So, let's have a look at another aspect of the brain now called the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is within the limbic system rather than the prefrontal cortex. And part of the limbic system, this is concerned with emotion. All right? It's perfectly placed, guys. The amygdala is perfectly placed. As a consequence, if I shot an arrow through your eye, and I shot another arrow through your ear, where these two arrows meet is the actual geographical location of the amygdala. Okay? And it's both on the left and right hand hemispheres of the brain. Okay? So this is concerned with emotion and affect. Okay? Affect with an A. There's emotion. What we're actually looking at here, the role of the amygdala is to analyse, number one, emotional physiological response. So if I said BANG! You would probably crap your pants, and judging by some of your people's expressions, you either smiled or you went, I can't believe you just did that, got quite angry. Agreed? So your response was to, holy bejesus. I was scared to bejesus. Okay? So did your heart rate go up?
Yeah.
Did your breathing just go, whoa? Did your stress hormone, your adrenaline go up as well? Absolutely. And this is where all this information actually pulls in, okay, the amygdala. Now, I'm going to suggest to you that there is some kind of complex circuitry between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. If you flip the brain around here and pretend that this is the actual frontal lobe here, the prefrontal cortex was actually on the lateral, what we call ventrolateral, which is right side of the front brain. There's a circuitry between there and the amygdala. NACC means nucleus accumbens, and that's to do with reward and motivation. Okay, I'll speak less about that today. So in this circuitry, we have these threats to self-regulation. I'm just going to cherry pick some aspects here. We look at alcohol consumption. Would you agree that your inhibition is reduced when you consume alcohol? Yeah, running down the street naked at 3 AM in the morning is a fantastic idea, fantastic thing to do. Yeah, not so much the next day when you're caught on camera. Very negative. Okay, so this actually affects the brain in terms of switching off the prefrontal cortex, reducing your inhibition, letting emotion take over. Girls, I'm sure after a night out on the grog, you actually feel a little bit more emotional, especially if you're home alone. Maybe you do. I know I do. I know. I think about myself here. Yes,
That's therapy.
Just silly examples. But you'll see this type of behaviour in adolescents. They're not sure about the consequences. Okay, that white matter in their front brain is turned off, if you like, and they have less of it. So we also have stress and sleep. Stress increases, switches off the prefrontal cortex. Sleep deprivation also switches off the prefrontal cortex, makes us tired and makes us lethargic, and we choose the easy option. Would you agree? Yeah? Your nutrition. If you have not enough glucose in your body, remember 30% is powered by the brain, or use is by the brain, then we make poor decisions. Yeah, we go for the easiest option. Okay, so there's some things that can affect your prefrontal cortex and the relationship with your amygdala. So let's have a look at some more evidence and some research and strategies that can support this argument. Okay, so the long and short of it is that the more you actually suppress or reduce your willpower, the more frequently you do it, the more baby steps you take with adequate rest and recovery, you will improve your willpower, your reserve or your reservoir of willpower. Okay, and I'll allude to a study in just a moment. The study that I'm going to explore is this one called Gym Membership and Exercise Diary. So in this interventional study, they actually gave for 2 months 3 intervention groups, either a gym membership for free, and this was in a big cohort of students, a gym membership for free, or an exercise diary. Okay, and they were mixed in 3 different interventions. And what they looked at was, if we give you the opportunity and you take small steps, baby steps, do you continue and do you proceed with habitual responses, habitual behaviours which are positive? Or do you go the opposite way and just go, gym membership, don't need that, eating diary, don't need that, and just go and continue with your old ways? Okay? What we found was that at the baseline level, okay, the baseline level, these are a number of fortnightly visits to a gym, okay? Cohort 1, Cohort 2, Cohort 3. Progressively over a 2-month period, they increased their attendance at that gym, okay? Just by simply going less than twice in 2 weeks initially, to going more than 6, upwards of 8 times per week at the end of the 2 months there. And it was just by having that opportunity to just take baby steps and continue on their journey to continue with this self-depletion and then growing from it as well. So some of the things that were checked was cigarettes, caffeine and alcohol. They also found that the units consumed of these different aspects were reduced at 2-month mark in comparison to the baseline valuation. Okay? Not only that, they studied various other things as well. Simple social activities like go and see friends instead of studying. They became more proactive in their studies. They missed less appointments. They didn't leave the dishes in the sink. Okay, that would be nice. And finally, they began in a more positive journey towards self-fulfillment and health. Okay, they began eating much more healthily over that two-month mark. Okay, so a very brief study, but it actually found that little chunk bites of exhibiting self or willpower improved you in the long term. Okay? So let's have a look at thought suppression and emotional suppression. Now we've got two different studies here. Now I'm going to ask you to think of the white bear. Okay, there's a little polar bear. There he is. Let's stroking this. Okay. Here is the white bear. Now in this study that they analysed, they asked people to think of the white bear for 5 minutes or suppress thinking about the bear for 5 minutes. And what they found was, in the suppression group, they initially thought about the white bear less for the initial 5 minutes of not thinking about the white bear, comparative to people who thought about the white bear, of course. But what it did, it had a rebound effect. Okay? The rebound effect was, after this period of time, they continued to think about the white bear. So, don't think about eating the cookies. Don't think about eating the cookies. Do not think about eating that cookie right now. Okay? All right? We might have done that for 5 minutes, but the rebound action is that you're going to want that cookie more. So when people say, don't do stuff, that's the reason why we say, well, I want to do it now, because you told me not to. Okay? Actively thinking about not doing it causes you to want it more and more and more. Or being told, you can't have that, you can't get that goal in life, makes you want it more. Okay? The second study was about emotional suppression instead of thought suppression. The emotional suppression was simply two groups watching a movie. Okay, it could have been a sad or a happy movie. Okay, one group was told, feel whatever you want to feel, cry, laugh, jump up and down, clap your hands, whatever it may be. Just don't suppress any feelings. The other group were told, you must suppress your feelings. You're being filmed. We'll be watching your every move. Okay. What they found in this study, a simple task immediately after this emotional suppression, is that performers were much worse at a solvable anagram task in the suppression group. Okay? Their willpower had been drained immediately after the movie. They were drained and they performed worse in a solvable task this time. So the authors of a lot of these studies researched emotion, thought suppression, solvable, insolvable tasks, etc., and they continue this. I can't go into all the research right now. So, these are small acts that are proven to strengthen your willpower. Okay, proven. Now let's allude to some of the strategies and implications now. If you go on a night out, or if you go for dinner and you are on a diet, for example, you can say to yourself, right, I am going to, if this happens, then I'm going to do this. Or when this happens, I'm going to do that. Okay? If you make agreements with yourself beforehand, you are much more likely to stick to those agreed behaviours. Okay? Therefore, you don't have to tax yourself, your willpower, your drive, your reserve, when you're on that dinner or out for drinks, etc. Does that make sense to you? Yeah? So you're not taxing it. You've already made that agreement. You've made a prefrontal cortex decision, and you're sticking to it. The second one is torture experiments. Now, I really like these torture experiments, not in the sense that you are going to torture somebody, but here is one of the actual tests or studies. They analysed people who are habitual smokers who smoked continuously 20, 30, 40 cigarettes a day. And these were addicted people. So they got the actual people to come into their laboratory setting, and they got them to bring a packet of cigarettes with them. All right? They said, put the cigarettes down on the table. I would like to look at that packet of cigarettes, and I want you to write down anything you're feeling for the next 2 minutes. After that period, they said, take off the wrapper, put the wrapper away. I want you to continue looking at that. Write down what you feel for 2 minutes. Then pick up the packet, smell the cigarettes. Do the same again, write down for 2 minutes. This went on for an hour and a half until the point that they had the cigarette in their mouth and they had the lighter to the cigarette. What they found that this process actually reduced the number of smokers by 40%. So 40% of people who habitually smoke every single day, 20, 30, 40 cigarettes, stopped smoking for at least 12 months. Wow. Okay? So very powerful. And it gave them conscious thought of, what am I doing? Am I responding to an emotional situation and just lighting up? Or am I thinking about actually what I'm doing? The second one here was a chocolate study. So those who are chocolate connoisseurs. So the chocolate study was, hey, we're going to take around a box of chocolates for 3 days. You have to carry it everywhere. When you go to the bathroom, the shops, wherever you go to school, you go to work, whatever it may be. You had to carry around this chocolate. Now, these people were chocoholics. Proven chocoholics. If they saw chocolate, they would be straight over to the coffee shop. Okay? And they'd be caught with their hand in it. All right? So the chocolates were a way into which challenge resolve. And what they used was an aspect called surfing the urge. And they went through this mantra of saying, right, if I feel the urge to do something, I'm not going to fight it, distract it, and think about something else, because we know that there's a rebound effect. Okay? So what they were told to do is pay attention to that. Feel like you're riding that urge, because as all urges, they pass, agreed? Eventually they pass, whether you partake in that urge or not. Okay? They eventually pass. So they were told to surf the urge, pay attention to it, and make a decision not to do that behaviour. Okay? And in all the cases of the chocoholics, not one of the chocolates was eaten for the entire 3 days. Okay? And they marked every single chocolate, by the way, with a number that was not visible to the people carrying the chocolate, so they knew that they couldn't just put a new chocolate in there. They did every control that they could make.
Yeah.
All right. So they are some torture experiments that you might be able to administer with your clients to improve their behaviour. Being mindful is something I used to practice quite a lot. I've got to say, I really found a great resolve from being mindful. That is shutting out all extraneous information and concentrating on something so simple like breathing. Okay, just simply breathing. Meditation, yoga is a very good source. Okay, and we also finish off with a what the hell effect. Okay, I've had a great, really healthy breakfast. I went for a run this morning. Therefore, I know I can have a really unhealthy lunch. All right, avoiding the what the hell effect. Or what the hell effect is one aspect that you need to consider and make behavioural modifications to that. Surfing the urge and mindfulness are activities that can help. So to summarise, guys, we've talked about a little journey through the brain. We've analysed the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala in the confusion of signals, especially in people who have initial behavioural difficulties with diet, etc. and exercise. Dr. Morwena Kerman, just to summarise her actual presence, I liken her to a duck. Okay? So I like to think she was stood behind a lectern, above the water, she was calm and still. But behind that lectern, her legs were going like crazy. That's the way I like to think of her. But she was very calm on the surface and very amiable as a Kiwi, I think she was. I would say, with a name like Morwena, I would say she was more likely to be a Kiwi. Yeah, she was great. She came dressed in a big puffer jacket, and she looked like she was either going to book out the sheds, the horses, or climb a mountain. I couldn't decide which. Right? But she was very positive and a really thorough analysis of so much research in a short space of time. Guys, if there's any further questions, let me know. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Yeah, boy.